I shoot a lot of streetscapes, street life. The dentist again, this guy, his name is Muhammad Kizar, and he gave me his card which said Muhammad Kizar WD. I asked him what it stood for. He said without degree, So, padha likha nahi hu sir, he said, so. That's the guy on the right hand side, sir. Well, a typewriting institute still functions, I was completely amazed to see, and it's full of students. And I went there and shot some pictures. It was very interesting for me. I have to go and interview the person who runs it. So this is the kind of things I do as a part of it. Seeing the city in various forms, various things that happen within the city spaces and the landscape itself. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahesh. That was very interesting and a lot of little.
Sorry, there are more pictures.
We go quickly through.
Quickly, yeah. Again, it's shot at the fort. The horse-driven cart, which is kind of a symbol of Kant, at one point in there. Another thing, I'm concerned about is the water and sewage. This is a 24/7 perpetual river of sewage in Shivaji Nagar, and there is a drinking water tap right next to it. The first aqueduct that brought water into the city in 1895 from Hesarghatta, only about 100 meters of it is left, and it's crumbling. The spirituality, the rise of spiritual gurus really interests me. The pyramid, which is one quarter the size of the Great Pyramid at Giza, in south of Bangalore, between I think JP Nagar and Kanakpura, apparently there are about 100 ashrams. And then you have a San Jose, of course, here, And yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, the last, this is the nice road linking Pina to Electronic City, and we are knocking the doors of the wild animals, and we just put a board and saying, drive carefully, but leopards keep on dying. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahesh. Lots of interesting narratives emerging there, which we will get to when we do the questions. Next, I'd like to ask Vivek Muthuramalingam to come and and I'm just setting up his presentation. First one.
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. Thanks for turning up in at least such a large number. I'd like to introduce myself as an independent photography practitioner working in the space of editorial and documentary photography for about 5-6 years. So I'd like to talk about my Facebook page today. I think it seems the more pertinent topic of discussion. And social media is something that you obviously cannot ignore. So on one really bored September day, night, I decided to do something with my pictures of Bangalore, and I decided to make a photography page. And I didn't want to call it something called as Vivek Muthuramalingam photography. It sounded very banal. I know a lot of you people might have your own photography pages, but I wanted something that created an interaction between the photographer and the audience. And I decided to call it a visual anthology of Bangalore. So some of these images were shot during my editorial assignments for a wonderful magazine called Time Out. For those of you who don't know what Time Out is, it's an arts and culture magazine with a very progressive set of editors and writers who actually encouraged me to dig deeper and deeper into the stories that Bangalore had hidden. So once I started sharing these images, I was kind of pleasantly surprised to notice that many of these photographs became a subject of collective nostalgia. So people started writing about their childhood days in the city, things that they now miss about Bangalore, and perhaps even some of them, who are no longer Bangaloreans, but they expressed a desire to come back to the city. So I thought it was a very interesting and very unexpected way of making use of my photographs. These are a few images of Bangalore. I mean, some of them are pretty cliched. Some of them are basically landmarks of city. But it's quite interesting because the kind of reactions that I got from this page was pretty unique. So I had a writer in Bombay writing to me saying that he's actually writing a fiction based in Bangalore, and he wanted to know if the context of Bangalore was in place. And I had a professor in Yale University who said that she's working on a book to do with street art in Bangalore, and she wanted to know if some of the things that she was writing about was pertinent to Bangalore. I'll just let the images run for a while. So as you can see, I've shot a lot of markets. I mean, it seems like the bread and butter for photographers, many of our photographers. Yeah, so that's the Facebook page. Now, another piece of work that I'd like to share is a bit more personal, and and it's called Leak. Basically, it began as a process of.
Should I play it?
No, not yet. Yeah.
That's big screen.
Right. So it began as a process of exploring Bangalore's really busy spaces like Chickpet, for instance, where it was difficult to see beyond the chaos of chaos and confusion of daily life. You saw a lot of people in the daytime, doing their own commercial activity and disconnected with each other, and a lot of activity going on. So it was very difficult to imagine the space as such. So I went on a very personal exploration of these spaces, and I wanted to see how these spaces behaved when they were void of people. So obviously the time that I chose was pretty late at night, so maybe about 12 in the midnight, or perhaps 2 in the morning, to observe how these spaces behaved. I actually wanted to capture the character of the space, without people being in them. So at some places I was pretty successful, but in others I completely failed, because I also knew that a lot of people trickling in and out, and I decided to photograph them as well. They had a lot to express. I mean, they probably worked in some of the places close by, and in many ways, they were more true to themselves. I mean, there were a lot of emotions in them, and there was solitude, there was loneliness, and perhaps some of them even express the pleasure of having that solitude in such a busy place at that particular time of night. This is a piece of work which I basically called Leak. Yeah, so as a parting thought, instead of, repeatedly taking the same shots of the markets or of the bus stand of the railway station, I'd like to encourage photographers and non-photographers to use whatever medium they have at hand to document the surroundings. I mean, and create interesting personal narratives. I don't want to see how City Market looks like. I want to see how 17th Main in Jayanagar looks like. And I think these bodies of work will form an important commentary on the evolution of Bangalore as a city. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Vivek. Every photographer does personal work and commercial work, and we shall, in the discussion, explore that conflict. I'd like now to ask Ryan to come, and he's going to share another take on the mythical city, really, as in the city is, and really look at the inner lives of people through this project that he's working on, and in the city, as it were. 1 second, let me just set it up for you.
So we'll start looping the photos after about a minute or so, okay?
1 second.
Yeah, that one. We'll play like a slideshow, right?
Okay. You want it like a slideshow now?
Yeah. Well, we can start in a bit. You can keep it on pause, right?
It's on pause.
It's on pause.
Then
So to
then
start,
you hit the
yeah.
space bar.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Ryan Lobo, WD, and I've lived in Bangalore all my life. I make a lot of documentary films, and during the process of making films, along the way, I decided I enjoyed still photography. And I mean, nowadays everybody owns a camera, like Mahesh was saying. It could be a cell phone camera, it could be a digital camera, but everyone's taking photographs. Photography has become like a language, and you have different forms. You have your vernacular forms, you have your schooled forms, you have your more sophisticated forms. Owning a camera is like owning a pen, but like owning a pen, everyone might own a pen, but very few people might be able to create something meaningful or of value to society, something which endures. So very often I feel photographs from a city, from a town, reveal the photographer more than they might necessarily reveal the story at hand, if you will. In that same vein, our aesthetics, our architecture, our performances, our art, they reveal us. They reveal us from the insides out. So you can look at a city from various points of view. So looking at Bangalore at a very base level, you could look at Bangalore from the point of view of its buildings, its architecture maybe. I mean, when I was in St. Joseph's Boys High School and we learned about Mohenjo-daro, there was always an aerial picture of the excavation, One day in the distant future, I think there'll be an aerial picture of a very large Bangalore, of the excavation maybe, you never know. So you can look at a city from this point of view. But another way of looking at a city or of a civilization, if you will, could be through the inner lives of its inhabitants. It could be through the various narratives of its inhabitants. So we all look upon ourselves as heroes in our own story. Whether you're a laborer from Chhattisgarh who's come down to Bangalore to build Infosys buildings, or whether you're a documentary filmmaker who's lived in cantonment all his life and who still doesn't know very good Kannada, we all see ourselves as heroes in our own stories. So the photos which you're going to see now, which I'm going to start looping, I just hit the space bar, right? I'm not going to tell you what they are, but as I continue speaking, hopefully it'll become clearer. So India today, our cities, we're in the largest demographic shift in the history of the planet. It's more so than China also, where people aren't necessarily allowed to move to cities in large numbers. But what you find in India today is huge numbers of people moving towards the cities from villages and little towns. So Bangalore is no exception, and you have, you take a walk down Brigade Road and you have, and you look at all the different aesthetics, all expressions of what lies within, and you have your kids from the Northeast with their perfect blue jeans and their caps, their American caps and their Nike shirts, and young boys from little villages outside Bangalore wearing very tight polyester pants, leaning against the railings. Then you have your old cantonment dwellers, slightly irritated by everything, walking along, and so on and so forth. So the city today has become, it's like being in the Lord of the Rings, except you don't really know who the orcs are, all the hobbits are present on the street today from all the different outlying places. So our villages are moving to our cities, and with these movements, with these huge shifts, you also have various histories, various cultures, if you will, various experiences of history moving into these cities. And while a lot of people would say, oh, it's a melting pot, like say New York, that doesn't necessarily happen in India, because in India we depend on community, family, neighborhoods for support. You don't necessarily look upon the system to look after you. So, there's this wonderful line from a Coetzee novel, which is, the barbarians are at the gates. But the only trouble in Bangalore is nobody knows who the barbarians really are. The old cantonment dwellers might complain that there are no public spaces, like myself. I complain about it all the time. The pavements are growing narrower, that there's tremendous pollution, that it's so corrupt. But then you have the people from outside the city, small town Shimoga, who are thrilled to be in Bangalore. The guy can afford a two-wheeler. His father never had a two-wheeler. He's very happy to be here. So I remember a dream I had when I was 7 years old, and I was in a flying car and I flew over Brigade Road. And when I looked out of the car, I could see a lot of familiar faces. There was Mr. Lester, Mr. Matthias, Mr. Gulrajani, the Sophia's toy store. And that was the topography of my childhood, if you will. All these characters, all these individuals. And if you look at it in a historical sense, a lot of them came from the Madras presidency. So cantonment was built by people, if you will, or it was inhabited by people who did not speak Kannada, who were from other states, so on and so forth. And this was surrounded by the areas under the control of the Mysore people, and that includes Pete and so on and so forth. So